and how age can be a spiritual practice in and of itself. With that notion in mind, the 7 years old struck me as a very powerful song to play around with that idea. The other thing that is an overlay to that song was my hearing about the performer on National Public Radio. They did a program about him. And his father was from Norway and his mother was from Northern Ireland. So he came from a very mixed background. And his father died when he was still an adolescent. So he had this experience where in the song he projects about living to his dad. And one of the things about this particular artist was carrying stories, feeling like he was carrying stories on his father's behalf. Feeling like he not only had to live for himself, but feeling like he was living for his dad. One of the things that he also identified when he was speaking on the program was about his own commitment to his children. How will he make a difference in their lives? So, while the song, when I first heard it, I thought, well, this is kind of repetitive. Once I was this, once I was this, once I was this. But I think that we all get into this kind of repetitive sense, imagining what different times are going to be like. So the notion of age as a spiritual practice, I want to look at it from two perspectives. I want to look at it as both the ages through which we progress and how moving through those ages can invite us into spiritual practice. The other thing that I'd like us to think about are the ages in that sense of time. The ages in which we live. The ages that have had an impact on this age and this time. In terms of each of our individual ages, I don't know about you, but can any of you remember the kind of thrill about waiting for some of those big days? The big thrill about, is it my birthday yet? Is it Thanksgiving yet? That sense of anticipation, that what is coming is going to be so great. Just let ourselves take a moment and get in touch with that kind of energy. It was almost boundless. There were no breaks, no way to limit it. This excitement was just infectious. And even if our parents might not have felt it, they got it because we probably hammered them with it until they couldn't just give in and go with us. Oftentimes, for little children, that time frame between this holiday and this holiday seemed immense. Was it ever going to come? Was it ever going to arrive? Just from one holiday to the next. Several years ago, we had a conversation with our housemate at the time, and she made this amazingly astute observation that the whole reason for children that it takes so time is that they've lived such a little bit amount of time. Mm-hmm. So 6 months is like a third of their life. Whereas by the time you get to be my age, 6 months is a much smaller proportion of my total time lived. A year is a much smaller proportion of my time lived. Again, I can't speak to any of you, but I know that this year seemed to go by more quickly than the year before. That I can look up and say, oh my God, is it really March again? Have we really come to another springtime? Is it already time for did the Olympics happen? Did what happen? these things cycle in terms of our age. We're most frequently aware of marking our age with years. Dates within those years, those times to celebrate. The spiritual practice that I want to invite us to consider about our own personal age and our own personal years is to lean back into that sense of our when we were little and try to recapture some of that excitement, some of that enthusiasm. Now you may be thinking, well, I can't do that anymore. That was easy when I was little. You know, anything could excite me when I was little. I mean, you know, there was a sound outside, I was excited. Maybe it was some package for me. And if it wasn't, then I didn't let that excitement about the package not being the package for me overwhelm me. There was something else that would turn around and be exciting. The invitation is, how do we orient ourselves to reintroduce that kind of excitement, to reintroduce that kind of thrill, that kind of enthusiasm? Well, one of the ways to do it is just focus on the things that we love. What do we love? What inspires us? How do we put our time and energy there rather than on the things we don't like? I mean, I think a couple of people here have heard me say it, but when I went out skiing, I spent an awful lot of time on the ground. And it wasn't until someone said, you're just going where you're looking. I was so anxious about where my skis were taking me that because I was looking on the ground, I always ended up on the ground. The minute that they said, look to where you want to go, and you will magically go there. But I'll get there too fast. They said, just look the other way, look up the hill. You can't go fast if you're going up the hill. And they were absolutely right. Where we look is where our body follows. So this very simple notion of being on those skis and speeding along could be broken by just looking uphill and going there. Where do we look? Where do we focus our attention? So it's two steps. I'm inviting the enthusiasm, and you ask how to get there, and my suggestion is by looking at what we love. By looking at where we want to go. By looking at where and who and what we want to be. Well, that's too hard. You're right, it is hard. But it's not too hard. Unless we give in to that and say it is. Then we get exactly what we have. It's too hard. We're looking down at the floor. We're looking down at the ground. And we might end up with snow all over our faces. We're on skiing. Sometimes, particularly as we get older, there can be a sense of anxiety about what older age will bring. I don't know, there's not too much out there in the world that carries the sense in our age about the power and beauty of age. We, as an age and time, put a lot of focus, a lot of value on faces that are unlined, bodies that look perfect. I remember years ago when the sitcom Friends was out, it always amazed me that these beautiful group of 6 people were able to live in the kind of way that they lived and had very little in the way of income to support that kind of lifestyle. I remember growing up, a person who used to come to our house was an Amish woman. Rachel, and she would clean for us. In Rachel's Amish society, old age was a feature of venerability. There was this huge respect for people of age. Now, as a person raised in this culture, as a person raised in this age, her lifestyle just seemed, I couldn't know how she could live like that. She came to our house and could plug in the vacuum and she could run the vacuum cleaner. She went home and there was no electricity. Where she cooked her food was in a log heated oven. Yet sometimes she brought her food, and I'll tell you, it was every bit as good as what was available with an electric or gas oven. How was it that she and her people were able to have such lives? I couldn't make sense out of it. Again, I pulled the story of Rachel in because sometimes different ages and the way that different people move through the world can have a huge impact on our own lives. That's that other side of age. Rather than simply looking at how old we are, we can look at what is the age in which we are living. And how do we choose to embrace or look away from what it promulgates, what it says is the highest and best thing for us. In the song, when he was 11 years old, his dad told him that it was important to find a wife and get married. Now, I'm sure we've all heard messages conveyed to us at a very early age about how to live in the world. Those messages have changed over times. So, for example, for myself, when I was a little kid growing up, there was no image for me about being a man that could love another man. It just wasn't, there wasn't anything out there to see that. There wasn't anything out there spoken of. And yet there was a whole age, Greek society, that expression of homosexual love was deemed their most significant kind of love. Heterosexual love got you children, but it was the love between men that promoted the society. But that certainly wasn't what was taught when they talked about Greek myths, and they talked about Greek history, and they talked about Greek democracy. And yet many of those pieces from Greek history were things that have impacted our age. The notion of democracy, it didn't just hatch an untried notion. It had been put into practice. The notion of a republic had been put into a practice. In any age that we live, other ages inform it and impress upon it values. How many times even do fictional imaginings come from those other stories? There are so many times that stories take older pieces and they present it in a new setting. Things that were science fiction 25 years ago are things that we live every day. The notion of being able to talk to somebody just walking along the street through your Bluetooth device 50 years ago, if people were to come to our city and see people, I don't know, how you doing? They would think they had landed in the middle of Bedlam. Sometimes we are in the middle of Bedlam. True. Different ages do inform what we think of as regular, what we think of as the way to be. So how do we shed light on this age that we're all sharing? How might we choose to be light bearers in this age? A couple weeks ago, there was news coming down about the absolute probability that the health care that was here in this country was going to be undone, and in its place would be something vastly superior, except that it wasn't vastly superior. And there were enough people that recognized that this bill of sale that was trying to happen didn't seem to be all that great. So that bandwagon, which had been loaded with people who had been rah-rah cheering for it, kind of jumped off of the bandwagon. And what seemed highly probable got turned around. I say this because sometimes an age can seem to be going in a particular direction, and it may feel insurmountable. It may feel as if that meteorite is on its path to Earth, and there is nothing that can happen that can knock it off course. One of the things that Earnest Holmes, the founder of religious science and science of mind philosophy, described was that each of us is a place of power. Each of us is a place through which the divine is operating. So to this age, we all have the opportunity to bring our attention, our intention, our loves, our desires, what we long for. We have the opportunity to choose to join hands with other people. We also have the opportunity to recognize sometimes we've joined hands, and that might not be a hand that we need to continue holding. We are free to choose. It may feel that we are bound and caught. Sometimes, in those times when we feel bound or caught, that's an opportunity to lean into others who can know something different than what we expect. We can lean into that childish enthusiasm, that childish energy. So no, we may not personally feel it. We can acknowledge that that's not how we're feeling, but we can ask for support. We can seek. One of the lovely things about the mission here is its community. And I'm not just talking about the community of the people here, but I mean the communities that we make in our worlds. Who do we deliberately draw into our lives? Who do we deliberately name as family, as friend, as beloved, as precious? Again, in that song, his mom told him, find some friends or you'll be lonely. Who are the friends that we are continuing to make? The value for this month is the notion of education, the value of education. One of the things I heard the other day on a program was a means to find education is to look at every conversation as a learning opportunity. What if any and every person that we encounter is the Buddha, is the Mother Teresa, is the Kuan Yin, is the Jesus? I say, what if? And then I turn it around and say, it is. It is. So if each of you are that presence of the divine, how might I be moved with a sense of enthusiasm that I didn't recognize until I acknowledge that, until I see how it is the divine that is looking at me, that has something that can never be replicated anywhere else, but right here and right now. And then to turn around and to keep seeing that over and over. Whatever the age, whatever the individual age of that person, whatever the individual age that I let shine through at any given moment, whatever the age and society that I see myself in. So it'd be very easy to see ourselves in the decline of the Roman Empire. The Mongols are at the gates. You know, Genghis Khan has a fabulous horse-mounted army who have been making their way here. Fists raised. It would be hard to see that in the kind of propaganda that is being sold. What if that so-called pack, we throw over it another age, an age of seekers, an age of people who are looking, rather than defining that other group as our enemy, defining it as a band of lost brothers and sisters. Not that we necessarily have the answer and that we can direct them and tell them how they're going to find their way, but to stop living in that age of us and them and to live in an age of ours. To live in an age of, isn't that cute? But I sometimes still fall back in that age of accusation. That somehow there's going to be a high noon shootout. And there will be one right survivor who will lead everyone to the place where they need to be. It's a younger age that lacks a capacity to envision a broader picture. So let age, our personal ages, be about accumulating a broader means of seeing. A way of embracing perspectives that can seem altogether foreign. What would it be to be altogether foreign and yet for us to say, that's mine too? In some ways that brings us all the way back to that infant that infant has no fear. They see whatever comes before them with love. What if we carry that kind of age, that kind of love of the infant? We carry that kind of wonder of the toddler. That kind of reckless and just jumping into everything of the adolescent. That kind of optimism of the 20s. That kind of, I can frickin' do this, of the 30s and the 40s. That kind of, I've done this, of the 50s and 60s. That kind of, why did I even worry about it, of the 70s and the 80s? Let it all come through on a moment-by-moment basis. It doesn't have to belong to us personally in whatever age we're at. We can choose our age at any given moment. And we can choose to shape the age in which we live. And so it is.
Vaughan, can I say something?
Yeah.